South FM, and it's reached that time of the month again where we have our financial expert, Breffni May of May Financial Planning. Go back to the show, Breffni.
Nice to be back. Nice to be back.
Good. And we have a special guest today. It's David Jordan of Jordan's Pharmacy. Welcome to the show, David.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Okay, Breffni, first of all, let's cover what's going on in the news, because there's been lots been going on, and I suppose the big thing over the last week was the home loans and the central bank. So they came through with this mortgage cap after all. We doubted whether they would, but they did. So,
well, we knew they were going to.
Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
It's to be seen. At the moment, they're introducing it. They say they're going to introduce the whole animal. They have made a change on it. They're looking at first-time buyers, and they've eased out a certain extent in terms of the amounts that people need to have saved before they can get a loan. But they haven't changed one thing. They haven't changed the multiples involved. Mm-hmm. They're still sticking to their guns on that one. It will have an impact on property values. It will have an impact. And one thing was very interesting. Honohan was saying during the week, is it a question of should somebody buy or should somebody lease? And long-term leasing. And we've been hearing about this. The government have been flying kites about it all last summer in the newspapers. Our European cousins don't buy houses. Mm-hmm. They lease their homes, and they have lifetime leases. And the astonishing thing is, 100 years ago, 90% of people in Ireland actually didn't own their own home. They leased them. Now, we think that's a bad thing today because we say, it's bad dead money and all that sort of stuff. But that's the reality. When you buy a house, what do you get? You get the right to live there for the rest of your life, as long as you keep paying the loan. I own my house. I paid it off there a couple of months ago. Happy days. Doesn't make a damn's worth of difference to me and Anita. We still own the house. We still live in it. All it does is give us the right to live there. Now we've got something that the kids can fight over. But what it does give us is tenure. And at the moment, the way the rental market is structured, you're renting for a year, or you're renting for 2 years or 3 years. That's bonkers. You have no security in that. And it was interesting to hear the Minister for the Environment talking about possibly long-term leasing coming in and a proper structure around that. And I expect something to come on the back of this as well, because government's not stupid. They're not allowing the central bank to go away and put the cosh on first-time buyers or people who are buying houses without having a part two. And I think the part two is going to be this question of long-term leasing. And frankly, our European cousins have it. By the way, if you're living in America, 90% of the people living in New York lease their homes. They don't own them. They don't need to, because they can get a lease that's 10, 15, 20 years. It has one advantage. If you're living in Dublin and you own a house and the dream job opens up for you in Cork, you can't take it because you can't move. But if you can sell a lease and move down to Cork and buy a lease down in Cork, happy days, you're off. And that's what happens in Europe. And that increases the mobility of people around Europe. That's what's happening. And is it the right thing or the wrong thing? I have kids who are looking at the market and deciding, will I buy a house or not? And that's the question they're asking. Do I want to own a home? And a lot of people are being turned off and saying, do I really want to have to save 45,000, 50,000 euro to buy a house in a 3-bedroom semi-detached in Ballygo backwards and stay there for the rest of my life and end up paying it and slave to a bank? That's a real question. And this game hasn't been played out yet.
And it's just, you talk about long-term leasing there. What about the issue of rental caps? We've seen rents go up by about 25% in Dublin last year. I mean, that's a major cause of concern, because I suppose it's creating here, we've got a landlord class and a rental class.
Well, at the moment, in David's situation, is he's got his own premises, and he may have a lease on that thing, but that lease is regulated. And it can't be reviewed until every 5 years, and it is going to be reviewed in relation to the markets and what's happening in the market around them. That thing will have to happen exactly the same way in the long-term leasing. Otherwise, you have chaos.
Now, you say property prices are going to be hit by this, but there was a PwC report there in January, which is very influential, and Dublin came out number 2 behind Berlin. So there's going to be what's called a lot of real estate investment trust money, maybe international money coming in, and all because of QE as well.
Yes.
So I suppose that's going to be affecting the market here as well.
It is, but they're going to want to come in here, and they're going to want to buy the property here, and they're going to want to have somebody to own it and tenant. They're going to be looking for tenants, so they're going to be looking at the question of long-term leasing. Remember, the biggest property company in the state is called NAMA. They have 7,500 homes, which they now have. They can release them on the market tomorrow morning, and they can kill it, stone dead. And it can be houses. You can give them away with green stamps, and That's how powerful NAMA is. They can control the market if they want to, and they are the child of government, and they will do what they're asked to do and what makes sense in the market. At the moment, there is an oversupply, but it's in the hands of NAMA. They're not releasing that into the market. They actually don't want to, because they don't want to sell you and me an individual unit. They want to sell somebody 20 or 30 or a whole block of units. So there's a lot to play for here. It's not finished yet.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've been watching the European stock markets and the euro quite closely, and the European markets have a little bit of a comeback here. It's the Mexican standoff between Greece and the ECB maybe has dropped slightly. The finance minister was in Europe this week, and the demand for the debt write-off has dropped. And he's now calling for a debt to be swapped for growth-linked bonds.
Yeah, well, I mean, are you surprised? I mean, we had in the last election, before the last election, we had Labour jumping up and down, telling us what they were going to tell Europeans to do. They quickly changed their tune when they got in power, and they realised the cupboard was empty, and they have to pay the bills next week. And Greece is now facing the same problem. They need to get some more cash in the can from the Troika. Doesn't matter what you want to call it. They needed to get it from us to pay the bills for their workers. Otherwise, they're in default. They haven't got enough money to pay the bills next week. Mm-hmm. So they've changed their tune. Of course they had. Of course they will. And our government did exactly the same thing. They were faced with the reality. It's very different when you're outside the fence. It's when you get inside the fence and you realise, actually, there is nothing on the shelf. And you now have to make decisions. And you have the responsibility. It's easy to be a hurler in the ditch and shout and throw bricks at people, but it's a different kettle of fish when you're inside the house.
So you think it's been sabre rattling to get elected, and now that the business has been done, it's politics is about compromise, really?
I don't think so. I think they were absolutely deadly serious about it. But I think the reality that they were told when they moved in was a hell of a lot different than what they had thought it was. And, that reality changes people's minds very quickly. Yes, you can make decisions and you can decide to implement things, but there are consequences. And those consequences can be hugely severe for a country. So they can come and push and shove and rant and rave all they like. There are realities out there. They have to pay the bills next week. And the wages have to be paid at the end of the month for the civil servants. And that has to come from somewhere. If you're not generating it internally, it's got to come from somewhere else. And they cannot afford to default. If they default, there's nowhere to go. Nowhere to go, except the IMF.
Now, the price of oil. I mean, these are very interesting times out there. The last 2 days, the price of oil has bounced back by 11%. Now, do you think this is a long-term recovery? Is this the upsurge, or is this just a dead cat bounce?
I don't know what it is, to be honest with you, but I can tell you it's having an impact on you and me, and it's not just at the pumps. It's having an impact in terms of the investments that we've got, because prices in Europe are falling, because the cost of transport is falling. It's impacting on stocks and shares and the value of companies because their costs just went down. It's also impacting on transport and electricity pricing. So it does have an impact. It also has a negative impact as well, because it's not divorce, and you can't divorce it from quantitative easing either, because what's happened with quantitative easing when they brought that in here, the value of the euro fell against the dollar, and oil is priced in dollars, and so there is another side of this thing. And so the euro went down by 8%, price just went up, oil just went up by 8%, and if prices go back up, you now have an escalator. So it's not, there's a lot going on here, and it does impact on you and me, and it hits our pension funds. All of this stuff has impacts on us. When the euro fell against the dollar, straight away your American holdings in your pension fund and everybody else's pension fund shot up. But quantitative easing has another side of this thing as well, and it impacts on pension funds. When you mature your pension and you come to retirement age and you have to buy your pension, you purchase what's known as an annuity, and those rates are fixed by the long-term interest rates or bond rates in Europe, and those have just fallen again. So when you're coming to maturity, there is the potential for the income that you might have expected to get being impacted on by this. So there are consequences in quantitative easing. They haven't thrown an awful lot of money out there. And they've been very careful about it because they know this has consequences for every country in Europe and impacts on everybody who's coming up to retirement age and every pension fund. And if there isn't enough money in the pot at the end of the day, then somebody has to put it in to make sure your pension is secure. That's how quantitative easing isn't a simple solution just for business or banking. It has impacts out on the rest of us.
Mm-hmm. And it's already. I mean, you speak about the euro dipping. Barclays Bank has come out and said that by the end of the year it'll probably reach parity with dollars. First time it's done that since 2002. So that's yeah. Okay, we touch more on domestic matters here. That you hit on pensions there, breffni. We have the pension authority investigation into source pensions, which was formed by Adrian Daly in 2009. It reported losses of 2.55 million at the end of last year. What exactly is going on there?
The Pensions Authority, we don't often hear about them. They jumped on this thing very, very smartly. The last time we heard about them was when Custom House Capital got into difficulties, and they had delayed. They were told 2.5 years before they moved on Custom House Capital that there was a problem, and they were told 2 or 3 times, and it cost Pension Pot a hell of a lot of money. So the Pensions Authority are there overseeing what's happening in the pensions market and overseeing the providers in the market, and they got information that made them move quickly with Pension Source. The one thing I have to say is that the Pensions Authority have secured the funds of the investors.
They're secure?
Because I have said they have secured the funds. Pension Source operate on a very simple basis. David actually is a customer of theirs. What Pension Source do is unique in the Irish market. They provide a facility where anybody who wants to invest in a multiple of insurance companies in Ireland can use their facility to put their pension money with a whole series of different companies operating in Ireland. And the difference is very simple. Using Pension Source is like going to the supermarket. You can buy beans and fish and jam and put it into your basket, and you can change all of that, rather than going down the main street and buying the tin of jam in the jam shop, and the fish in the fish shop, and the meat in the meat shop, where you end up paying a full retail pricing. Whereas using Pension Source, you're actually buying at wholesale prices or supermarket pricing. And it is an amazing facility. It has taken off in the UK. They're called what are known as platforms. It is an amazing facility. But the authority were told there's a difficulty with Pension Source, not the pension funds. And they're dealing with this thing and have jumped in immediately. And you know something? I'm delighted, because they've actually they've got teeth, an awful lot of teeth, and they're using it. But what they've done is they've got a court order securing the funds for the investors. The monies that people have put into Pension Source has gone through Pension Source out into the insurance companies, and it's with the insurance providers, not with Pension Source.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. So just moving on to today's guest, David Jordan of Jordan's Pharmacy. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, David, I suppose first of all, the reason why I have you here is just to talk about pharmacies in general and independent pharmacies. Is there a percentage of pharmacies in Ireland at the moment operating at a loss?
I would say it's a huge number.
Yeah?
Currently the Irish Pharmacy Union are doing figures on it, but would be reckoned that around about 25% of pharmacies would actually be at a loss as such. Many of those are just surviving on a month-to-month basis. They're paying the pharmacist owner. That's keeping it going. If the pharmacist owner isn't able to run it themselves, they're in trouble.
Yeah. And what would have been classed in people's eyes anyway as a former cash cow into a white elephant?
It was never that good. When times were good, pharmacy was good. That was the same as every other business that was out there. And then when times turned bad, it really went downhill. It was compounded by the fact that the biggest customer for a lot of pharmacies is the HSE. And they've cut back massively. So most pharmacies have had their income cut massively.
Mm-hmm. So when you talk about the HSE cutting back massively, are we talking about maybe the general medical scheme?
The medical card, the drug payment scheme, everything. The price they pay for drugs, everything's been cut back. I've had a situation with my pharmacy where the number of items I'm dispensing has increased every year I've been in business, but the actual cash I'm getting back from the HSE has gone down almost exponentially.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so is there an issue also with the delay in the payments, yeah, in the HSE?
A lot of the payments I get out of the HSE is paid electronically, and they're reasonably fast. But there are a number of schemes where the HSE will use any excuse just to delay payment, put it off for a few months, start looking for invoices, basically loaded with paperwork. I have one particular scheme, the hardship scheme, which can take up to 3 or 4 months to get paid. And even then, you're still waiting for it to get approval. And in most of these situations, the patient needs the medication there and then. They can't wait till 2 or 3 months till they get the approval saying the HSE says we'll pay for it. They need it there and then. And we're sort of left holding the can, hoping on a wing and a prayer that they will actually pay us in the end. And all this is done for the cost price of the medicine plus €5 for all our trouble.
Now, I suppose the frontline pharmacies have taken a hit. What about the wholesalers? Have they shared in the pain?
Yes, they've taken as much a bigger hit. Up to 2 or 3 years ago, we had 3 main wholesalers. Now we're down to 2, and even then there's been further layoffs. They're in the same situation, particularly with generic substitution and reference pricing. They've the same turnover of items going through, but much lower cash flow coming back with it. Volume is up, but value is way down.
I suppose a big thing is as well, we've seen over the last 10 years the emergence of new alternative channels. And when I talk about alternative now, we were talking about online, self-medicating, shall we say. Has that been a big factor?
Not for me personally, because most of my business is based on the medical card and government schemes. And for those businesses, you have to go physically into the pharmacy. The online pharmacies is a small segment of the market. And generally, there are people who are going to be shopping around anyway. So I wouldn't have been seeing an awful lot of them. And as I say, it's a small section of the market. It's probably a most vociferous section that you'll hear a lot about them. But in terms of percentages, they're not huge.
So just looking at it as an overview, we're looking at maybe the 5 forces here that have really hit the pharmacy, like the squeeze maybe on healthcare budgets with the HSE, the intensifying competition as well, with maybe the more, what we call the more supermarket chains, maybe Boots.
Yep, they actually deal with a different sector of the market to the extent that they deal mostly with the front of shop, called the cosmetics end of the market. They're not as big into the dispensing, the medicines end. So I would concentrate, my pharmacy is almost 90% medicines. So to that extent, I'm not competing with Boots. Boots would be competing more with the likes of Tesco and the supermarkets in terms of what they're selling. There's always going to be competition there. The chains will tend to get the higher profile areas, like here in the centre, the high footfall areas, the high rental areas that the independents will never be able to get at.
Now, what did you think there just about the announcement by Varadkar at the weekend about the legislation to stop Ireland paying more than their EU counterparts for prescription drugs?
They've been saying the same thing for the last 8 or 9 years. There's very little more blood they can squeeze out of the stone. The biggest chunk of the bill being paid on drugs is being paid on the high-tech medicines, which actually pharmacies see nothing of. It's paid directly to the manufacturers themselves. It's mostly drugs used in hospitals, and that is now the biggest chunk of the drugs bill.
Apart from the fact that we engage with you, David, usually at a time in our lives when things have gone wrong. Is there anything else that your pharmacy and the other pharmacists around the country are actually providing that we don't actually know about? I mean, you mentioned one thing to me which I was a bit astounded about. If I want my Med One form, go to my pharmacist and he can produce it for me.
Yep. If you're going to the one pharmacy all the time, all your records will be there. I had somebody actually rang me yesterday looking for Med One forms for their family going back 3 years. Within 5 minutes, I had them all printed off, waiting to be collected. If you go to different pharmacies, yes, you'll have to ring up several different pharmacies. But the software is there. Most pharmacies can just do it in a couple of minutes. It's easily done.
And apart from that, what else? What other services are pharmacies now providing which we don't know about? Are unaware of?
The main one that I'm providing outside of dispensing medication is the 24-hour blood pressure monitoring and cholesterol testing. The 24-hour blood pressure monitoring is now the standard way of diagnosing high blood pressure. You wear the monitor for 24 hours, you get the printout. The doctor can look at the results and work from it. The cholesterol test is the same one that used to take weeks, years ago, that you go down to the hospital for. Now you go in fasting into the pharmacy. It's a finger prick test. You get the results within 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Well, maybe 6.
Well, that's a hell of a lot better than that, waiting a week to get it, which is what I get from my GP. Thanks very much. But I had no idea that you were doing that. One of the things that really struck me about when I was bringing you in here and inviting you in as a guest was the relationship building and the importance of that. And the importance of actually having a pharmacist that you understand. An aunt of mine died last year, and we were astonished at the amount that she was actually consuming in terms of medicines every day, just literally to keep her alive. I mean, and what's your role in relation to that?
At the moment, our role is fairly limited in terms of just providing the medications. Yes, we will review them going out and review them against the current history. So if a new medication is being prescribed in the hospital, we can compare it to what she's already on and see if there are any interactions or is there any problems with any of that. With so many healthcare teams looking after individual patients, there's the potential for one team to give something which will affect what another team is already doing is huge. And the pharmacist there can give an overall view of the whole thing. In the UK now, pharmacists are doing medicine usage reviews, where they're actually being paid by the NHS to sit down and look at all these medications and say, do they actually need all this?
Yeah.
Can we stop any of this? The pharmacist gets paid for doing all this. The NHS saves money because in most medicine usage reviews, a number of the medicines are just stopped. Hang on, they don't actually need this after all.
Right.
And the patient gets a better quality of life out of it. The pharmacist gets paid for the work, and the government saves money. It's a win-win-win all around.
Yeah. So as we're getting older, is building a relationship with an independent pharmacist what we should be doing?
Yeah, once you get over 50, you've got a 50% chance of being on some sort of long-term medication. And the same way you'll have a long-term relationship with your GP, I think you really should be needing to build up a long-term relationship with your pharmacist as well. They'll have a look and they'll be able to see stuff. You can go into them, they'll know exactly what you're on most of the time straight away. In my case, I'm only open 47 hours a week. Most of the time I'm there. They'll come in, they'll see me. If you go into some of the other chains, because they're open longer hours, there'll be 2 and 3 different pharmacists there. You won't be getting the same person all the time. You'll build up a rapport with them. They'll understand how you actually come to your medication.
So Mrs. Smith and Mr. Smith, when they're coming up from the GP, having had their annual checkup, and they're coming in with something else, that's when you really step into it and you come into your own at that stage.
I know most people would say would have the experience of going to the hospital where the nurses and doctors, 20 people will ask them the same questions every time, again and again and again. Pharmacists is at the end of that chain. They'll be asking the same questions, but they'll be asking them with a background knowledge of this is what they're already on. This is their attitude to all of these. I've seen loads of cases of people being prescribed drugs they were never going to take because we knew that they just weren't going to touch them. They haven't taken them before. As far as the doctor's concerned, it's on their chart and they're taking it. We know they're not taking it.
Wow. And I had no idea that was what you do. But apart from that, the other thing you mentioned to me as well is that you do minor ailments. People, saving money on that, but rather than going to GP, come to you.
Yep, we're there. You can see us without an appointment. Most of them, like myself, I've got 30 years' experience in this now. There's very little I haven't seen at this stage. I've done several first aid courses, so even at that, I've been patching people up as well. That was the original reason I did the first aid course, because I was patching so many people up. Again, in the UK, they're paid to do this minor ailment. Again, it takes the load off the GP. The GP service is overloaded. You go into pharmacists with experience, they can tell you if it's something that needs to be referred on to the GP or something that can just be treated with some minor treatment.
When you say minor ailments, give us an indication of what you're talking about there. Is that sort of the flus and things like that?
It can be anything from just a straightforward head cold, sinus, hay fever, build-up of earwax. Once you reach a certain point, you are going to refer them on. And you'll do this with the patient's medical history in mind. What may be just a minor case for some person who has a non-complicated history, if you go on to somebody who has some pre-existing medical condition that you're aware of, it's no longer a minor illness. You really need to be referring them on at that stage.
Right.
And this is where the relationship builds up. You already know the background of this person before you even start talking to them.
Right, well, that's great. That's fantastic. That's one of the reasons why I just wanted you to come in here and talk to us about it. Because from my point of view, we had when our children were small. My youngest lad, he ended up he had his first asthma attack, and there was a follow up on that, and then he ended up going to the chemist, and we went over to see the chemist with the prescription, and he said, "Is this for a horse?" Because what was on the prescription was not right for our young lad, and he ended up phoning the GP, and hey presto, we got a different change of prescription, and we would have been completely unaware of what was required here because he had taken the time and trouble to actually come back and do it, and that's happened over and over again. And the other thing as well is that as people get older, and I'm just thinking in terms of one of my clients at the moment who's having huge difficulties, and her husband is he's beginning to suffer. He's suffering from Alzheimer's, and it's a slow slide down. And she's worried about the amount of medication that she's got and the amount of medication that she's on. As she gets older, the question of, am I on the right stuff? Am I taking the right stuff? And then she's having to go back and see consultants and so on. Is this a role that you can play for her in her life?
Oh, yes.
Or in that area?
This is exactly where the medicine usage reviews come in. We look at the entire picture for the patient and decide. We have situations where people are on drugs for side effects caused by other medications.
Yeah.
Now, if you can reduce the dose of the first medication, you can get rid of the one for the side effect altogether. And this is where the medicine reviews review. You look at all the medications. You sit down, you look at that person. This can take time. Like we're talking, this will be the best part of 45 minutes, an hour, to actually do it for an individual patient. And you can sit down and you can work out for the patient, do they actually need all this?
Right.
And is this the right one for them?
And is this something that people should do on a regular basis? Or, and when I say irregular, every couple of years or so, pop in if they're not sure.
I think it is certainly if any time there's any major change in the medications. Like if you've been on the same tablet for 10 years and you've been doing well, there's no point messing around with it.
Right.
But if there's been some change and new medications are introduced, yes, it should be a time of sit down, have it reviewed. Not necessarily with the pharmacist, but certainly any major change needs a review.
Grand. Okay.
Just before we end, a question came in email. Just getting back to the pension issue. Will Ireland do what the UK are doing in allowing people cash in their full pensions?
That's a long way to go.
Yeah. Okay. No, at the moment, obviously.
In the UK, they're allowing people access to their pension funds. It is limited in what you're allowed access to. It's not walk in, put it in your pocket and walk away. It means that they have opened up the market to alternative forms of investment and leaving people a lot more flexibility. It's not as simple as it seems. It's not as simple as it seems. There are lots of strings. You know, with everything, the devil's in the detail.
Listen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Breffni, have you back next month. And also, David Jordan, welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for appearing on the business side.
Thank you.